Hey everyone, it's Jill Franquelli, and welcome to Conversations with Maryjane. Before we get started, just a few words from our sponsors. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is diagnosed after a person demonstrates symptoms like emotional numbness and avoidance of places, people, or activities that are reminders of that trauma. Feeling jumpy and being easily irritated and angered can also be symptoms. Cannabis has been shown as a possible treatment option for those where standard PTSD treatments haven't worked. And in fact, the United States Food and Drug Administration recently approved a medical cannabis trial for military veterans suffering from PTSD. The team at Peak Relief believes in the therapeutic power of cannabis and how it can be used to effectively treat PTSD and other medical conditions. To learn more about other qualifying conditions in Maryland, you can visit relief.tv/PTSD. Mention this ad for 10% off your total purchase during your next visit at Peak Relief. And you can follow them on Twitter and Facebook at Peak Relief and on Instagram at Peakstagram. Thank you so much for Peak Relief for your supporting Conversations with Maryjane. Our next sponsor, Pure Life Wellness, is my home dispensary. They're just a few blocks from where I live. I love going to see the team there. And my favorite day to visit is Industry Day on Tuesday. If you're in the cannabis or the restaurant industry, you'll get 25% off your order that day, and maybe I will see you there. You can visit them at the heart of Federal Hill, right across the newly designed Cross Street Market, and visit them online at purelifebaltimore.com. Thank you so much, Pure Life. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Maryjane. I'm super excited to have my good friend Josh Crossney here. He is the founder and CEO of Cannabis Science Conference, as well as the president and founder of J Canna. Is it J Canna Kids or just J Canna?
J Canna, and then I'm also on the board of Canna Kids.
Canna Kids, that's why I get those two confused. But what I'm
lots of
cannas, as it should be.
Yes.
What I'm really excited about, though, is you're accepting a huge award
next
month. What?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. It's the Vanguard Award for...
It's Saving Sophie. So Saving Sophie is the nonprofit arm of Canna Kids. It's based in California, and the organization's basically devoted to advocacy and education with treatment of cancer, epilepsy, autism, other serious conditions with children, and teaching families what this process is like, how to go through this, how to access good clean medicine, and they're hosting the Strides in Science Awards Gala next month in LA, and I just found out a few weeks ago that I'll be accepting the Vanguard Award for...
It's a great name for you.
Yeah, I love it. So for my global advocacy for, not just pediatrics, but also, everyone that should have access to this plant and education about it.
Yeah. Tell me, and I'm going to jump you professionally first, and then we'll go personally a little bit. Tell me, we're just coming off the Cannabis Science Conference in Oregon. So tell me, what was a high point there for you during that?
So the highlight of the show for me, which obviously, for me was having Olivia Newton-John and her husband Amazon John there. Not only because she's such a huge, celebrity and so beloved and respected, but her and her family have become friends of mine over the past couple of years. Her husband John has been speaking with us for about 3 years now at our conferences, and he's an expert, plant medicine guy.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a wealth of knowledge. They call him Amazon John because he lived in the Amazonian rainforest in Peru for 15 plus years and studied natural herbs and Amazonian herbs and also gems and their healing properties. And, Olivia, like I said, they've just become friends, and she's obviously dealing with her third bout of cancer, and plant medicine, cannabis, as well as other plant medicine, has played a huge role in her health. And we were honored to have them there and to share their story with our attendees, and I think everyone really enjoyed hearing from them.
Yeah, it was really cool. There were some ladies with some pink ladies jackets on, definitely beloved. But what also I thought was cool was they gave some really important information and what her example is for dealing with cancer. And I think the thing I walked out of there, and which maybe I knew, and it was something she said, but we're the only country that tries to annihilate cancer. Most places you're learning to have a quality of life. And the studies show people are living kind of the same.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like when you compare, the U.S. to other countries on many
Mhm.
different things, it's just like it's so flipped upside down here. Like
Yeah,
for instance, with pharmaceutical advertising in most other countries, you don't see the commercials on television like you do here. They're not
it's weird,
marketed.
right?
Yeah, they're not marketed to the consumer, if you will. They're marketed to healthcare professionals. So really, it's really strict in most countries that when you're marketing these pharmaceutical drugs, that you're marketing them to medical professionals and doctors, and there are
Yeah.
controls on that. Another thing that I think is really great that Olivia's mindset is not like, focusing on the prognosis and like how
Hmm.
much time this person says I have or how much time this person says I don't have. It's really about, like you said, having a quality of life, living as long as you can, and
Yeah.
and having a good quality of life. And for Olivia, and she talked about at the conference how she is completely got herself off of all the opiates that she was prescribed
Yeah.
in this time just using cannabis. So I think that's a huge testament right there. And obviously cancer is destroying your body from the inside out already, but then you throw in these harmful and dangerous opiates and all these other drugs that you take, especially if you're taking chemo or radiation or other treatments, and it's like you're just tearing your body up even more from those things. So
Yeah. I think you and I have a very similar opinion. What is your opinion with that? Like, is it just cannabis only for you, or what is, Western medicine part of this?
So for me, as you know, I kind of straddle the cannabis community as well as the traditional like science and medical
Yeah.
community. So I really have to be, true to fact.
Yeah.
And I think that I really feel that we're getting closer and closer to being able to prove things and to open up research and to get more results. But until that happens, until we can actually say that, hey, we know that this, type of cannabis cures this type of cancer, I personally feel it's almost negligent to advise people to just throw away Western medicine.
Yeah.
So I always encourage people to kind of look at it as an adjunct therapy as we're
Mm-hmm.
learning more and more about it. And I think that, like with any situation in healthcare, if you're not happy with what your, medical provider or professional is telling you, and they're not okay with you using cannabis in your treatment, you can obviously always get a second opinion or get another doctor or talk to
Yeah.
someone else. And I think we're seeing more and more doctors that are open to at least talking about this with their patients. But the problem is we're still not seeing enough traditional education in medical school for these medical professionals. And even though they're opening their minds to it, they don't really know what to tell the patients and how to help them utilize this medicine. They're just kind of,
Yeah.
along the journey with them and learning as they go with their patients.
Yeah. My grandfather said that his doctor told him not to take CBD because it would affect his shoulder surgery like 3 weeks later. And it was for no other reason than, there's some things you can't take CBD with, like statins or something, but it wasn't for any of that. It was just a miseducation, kind of like before surgery, you don't take aspirin.
Sure.
And so, yeah, that education, and that's why I love about the Cannabis Science Conference. And I have actually, the 2 times I've gone, I've actually seen just a lot of normal, everyday people there.
Yeah.
What do you think is going on with that? What do you see happening with the general public wanting to know?
So it's interesting, like with our shows, we kind of have, in the past, we've done 3 kind of distinct tracks of education. And obviously, the analytical science track, which is pretty technical and advanced. So if you don't have, some kind of science background, you've MC'd
I have to pronounce these words.
Yes, you helped us as an MC in Portland and in Baltimore, but specifically in that track in Portland. And, even for me, I always say, I am not an expert, analytical chemist or anything along those lines. I like to say I'm more of a connector, a bridge builder, bringing people together, advancing this message and really educating people. But I say that when it's kind of like, if you don't have, like I said, have that science background, it can kind of be a little advanced if you don't know what you're hearing. But we do parallel to that have the medical cannabis track that I think is great for patients and consumers alike, and also medical professionals that are trying to learn more, because it really does kind of speak to the patient or the medical professional in the sense to where the topics we're covering are routes of administration, cannabis for pediatrics, for geriatrics, different forms of cannabis, from suppositories to edibles to vaporizing, which is a big topic of discussion all of a sudden. obviously because of the issues that we've seen with that. And then we also have a cultivation science track that really is just like what it sounds, the science behind cultivation, which kind of, we get a mix of that. You know, there's a lot of people that are obviously more on the professional, like, you know, cultivator side of like the business, but then there's also people that are interested in just learning more, whether it be home cultivation or getting involved and learning more to potentially transition in that field. And then now for our 2020 shows, we're also incorporating a 4th hemp track.
Oh.
So we'll have a whole track at both of the 2020 shows that's dedicated completely to hemp. Yeah.
So 4 tracks now.
4 tracks now, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what else is coming in 2020?
So 2020, we're really excited to come back to Baltimore because, as you know, we launched our first Baltimore edition last year, and you know, I'm from here, and I've been living here, you know, all this time. But when we created the platform back in 2016, there really wasn't much going on the East Coast, and as far as medical or recreational. So we kind of knew that if we wanted to create this platform and really launch it and expand it into what it is today, and come out the gate strong, we had to take it out west. So we did that, and then over those couple years, we saw that the East Coast, I really call it like a medical cannabis revolution, because we saw like Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and many others surrounding that were making changes, especially with medical cannabis. And, you know, we knew that 2018 was the year that we were going to come back, and, you know, the community here support us, you know, so strong. And, you know, you were part of that, and so many others were part of that. And, you know, we had over 2,000 people at our first show here and about 125 vendors. So we're excited to, you know, bring it back to Baltimore in April and have over 3,000 people and hopefully closer to 200 vendors. That's awesome. And just keep growing it. And, you know, we'll be back in Portland in August 31st or September 2nd for that show. And, you know, we're talking with some really cool celebrity influencers for those 2 shows. We haven't announced anything yet, but I will say that, you know, I use the term celebrity influencer, and we've been really blessed to work with great people like, you know, like I said, Olivia and Fran Drescher, Ricky Lake, Montel Williams, you know, professional athletes. But at the end of the day, we're not really looking for just a token celebrity, if you will. Like, the people that we're working with are folks that have a substantive connection to this plant or this industry in some way. You know, Montel, for instance, you know, he's been suffering from MS since the 90s, and he's been an advocate for this, you know, going back to before this was, you know, the popular cool thing to do as a celebrity. Fran Drescher dealt with her own cancer journey, and cannabis has played a part in that. And obviously we discussed Olivia and, you know, her connection to the industry. But, you know, like I said, we're really interested in working with people that have, you know, the platform, the audience to really get this message out there to the masses, you know, more so than someone with maybe a couple hundred or a couple thousand followers. You're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of followers with some of these folks, and it really amplifies the message of this community. So we're looking forward to that. You know, it was great in Baltimore last year. We had Ricky Lake and Montel, so basically 2 really Baltimore, you know, connected people. Obviously Montel is from here. Ricky Lake got her, you know, whole start.
We all love.
Yeah.
We all love her.
With John Waters, you know, we're in Hamden right now, so you can't not give a nod to John. But yeah, so it's been a really great journey, and sometimes, you know, I almost have to pinch myself that it's all real. Yeah.
I want to talk about, so that pinching yourself that it's all real. So this, from the outside looking in, oh, you've made it. I want you to describe a little bit more about why you had to take the show out west, like what you were doing, because you actually had something pretty established, and how you pivot, and maybe what the lesson was and how that drives you today. I know that's a lot, but
yeah, you know, like for me, I like to think big, you know. So when I was putting this together, you know, before I got into the industry, I was in, I did staffing and recruiting for the analytical science community. So I placed individuals in various positions, from environmental labs, food safety labs, instrument manufacturers, and so forth. And I kind of, you know, and we've talked about this before, but I have obviously been a friend of the plant, a consumer like of the plant, whatever you want to call it,
family member
for many years, for many years. And you know, being in Maryland, and I'm sure you can relate to this, and being you know, connected to this plant, everything that was happening in California or Colorado or Oregon, you know, going back 6, 7, 8 years, might as well have been in another country, in another side of the
Yeah,
world.
true.
So we were kind of really far removed from that. But then when I really, I would say probably 2014, I just was hearing more and more about it. And I just decided to kind of look a little closer into it. I was kind of looking to do, a career jump. I wanted to take the time to really, see where I could fit into the industry. I think a lot of times, people think of this industry and they're like, oh, I got to open a dispensary, or I've got to, get a grow license. And like although those are great avenues to take in this industry, there's many other things to get into. I kind of jokingly always use the analogy that during the gold rush, it makes sense to get into the pick and shovel business sometimes.
Right? More money made than
So I mean, I kind of took a look behind the curtain, if you will, and started going out west to other states that had done stuff and attended some shows, and really realized that at the time we were really, really far behind when it came to the science behind this, and the research behind this. So, for me, coming from the analytical science community, which is such a tight knit, they've got such a hold on the research and the science of these different industries. It was definitely different. You know what I mean? And I kind of always compare the cannabis industry to like the .com boom. There really hasn't been a new American industry since that it's had so much potential and excelled so much, and especially given the fact that this is a Schedule I drug, and this has all happened under that being the case. So once I realized that, there was a problem with the research, it was next to impossible to do research in the US because of it being a Schedule I drug and trying to get that license. And, for the viewers and listeners that don't, really understand what the scheduling is, it's, the Controlled Substance Act is from Schedule I to Schedule V. Schedule I being the most harmful, most dangerous, and the no potential for therapeutic or medical use. And then 5, obviously, being a little, going less harmful in the opinion of this act. And, to put it into context, right now, cannabis is scheduled next to heroin, which I think that anyone that's in their right sound mind would never agree that cannabis belongs next to heroin, when cocaine is actually a Schedule II drug. So really, if you're going by that, it's kind of sending the message that, hey, cocaine's a little bit better to do than it is to do cannabis.
It was shocking when I knew that. I was like, this is out of control.
And then the other thing was, I realized that some states and some markets weren't even requiring quality control testing for their medical program. For instance, at the time, the state of California did not require quality control testing at all.
Wow.
So you have a whole, state full of people that are using this medicine. And again, coming from the analytical science background, that was alarming to me because I'm used to, if it's consumed, if it's, a lotion, if it's any kind of thing like that that's coming into human contact, it's tested for quality control. So that was a big thing. And, I connected early on with Tracy Ryan from Canna Kids, in my journey in cannabis. And that just really, lit a secondary flame underneath of me for what I was doing and gave me even more passion. Because, obviously if you're talking about, sick children that are, infants even, there's children that are months old using cannabis. And I always say that cannabis inherently is safe, and no one has ever died as a direct overdose of cannabis, but that doesn't mean that there aren't issues to worry about. So contamination, human error, obviously there's a whole conversation that's needing to be had about the vaporizer pens. What is behind that. So I think that just making sure that the science was, advanced a little bit, and really trying to encourage not just required testing in every market, but also standardized testing, to where each laboratory all across the country, or really even the world, were using the same processes and procedures to get their results. Unfortunately, we're seeing most of the markets are requiring testing at this point, but we're still not there with standardization. So we still have, another hurdle to go. But it wouldn't be the cannabis industry if we didn't have more hurdles to overcome.
So you did, so you had 2 fires lit underneath your ass about this, and you just knew that this was the industry that you wanted to start a business in, because this was your first leap into entrepreneurship. You started a show in Baltimore, like a show, not like a conference, right? Like a video show that was about cannabis. right?
So that was kind of that's an interesting story. So the medical cannabis report was something I started.
I'm like, I want to know about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was the host of the show, so the talent, if you will. And I was working with a couple of great guys that put this together. And that was kind of simultaneously, honestly.
Happening at the same time.
So we had started working on the show before the conference, the first conference launch, but they were kind of, synergistic time wise. And it was really great. It was this great program where we had different individuals from the community come on, and whether it be advocates or patients or people that were doing work or applying for licenses. Unfortunately, I just think that going back to 2014, 2015, it was a little too early, which kind of doubles back on the reason why we that had nothing to do with us deciding to do the show at West, but that was in our thought process before. I think that something like that would have probably lasted a little later, because it's hard to, and this is kind of the thought process we had with the show at West, is it's hard to get sponsorship money and get people to be really interested and passionate about something that's not there yet.
Sure.
So at the time, obviously medical cannabis was a conversation in Maryland, but the bureaucracy and the red tape and all those things, it was clearly to be some time before it was actually realized. But that was a great show. And
can we find that online somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Facebook page is still up. It's the Medical Cannabis Report. They I think they still do some educational content and more information sharing and stuff like that. But there's a few, there's I think like 6 or 7 or 8 episodes on there. And I'm a little thinner, my hair's a little longer, but you'll still recognize me probably if you find it.
I just think it's such a good lesson, especially for people who are looking to get into the cannabis industry, is that pivoting or changing course is going to happen. Yeah. Like inevitably, especially in an industry that's so new
and
like
fluid.
Cannabis. Yeah, like you just never know. So if you were telling anybody who is trying to make a leap into this, like what your experience, what would be some couple of pieces of advice that you could give them?
So like my number one piece of advice that I always tell people that are like, hey, what do I do? How do I get involved in the industry? Kind of going back to what I said before, is like really taking the time to examine the industry and, try to find things that aren't already being done by everyone and super saturated, and then really trying to hone in on your personal skill set. So like, what do you do now? Like, what is your job that you currently do that you're good at, that you're trying to leave and get into cannabis? How can you apply the skills that you have with that into the industry? And, for me, obviously, I was part of the Medical Cannabis Report. I've done a couple other things throughout my career, some other board positions and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, as far as my full-time job, owning and running the conference, I feel very blessed that I'm still doing the thing that I was doing when I entered the industry, which, not that like you said before, it's very fluid. Things are always changing. So not that it's a bad thing to change and switch around. Cause most of the people that I know are not doing the first thing that they started when they entered the industry. And obviously, the struggles of starting your own company and self-funding and things like that. Another piece of advice I would always give people is to not take money that you don't need, really understand how much money you need, because this is an industry where a lot of people are willing to throw $1 million check around or even more, but sometimes new entrepreneurs don't understand the implications of what that money comes with. I always say there's good money, there's bad money, and then there's what you get. And I think that that's a really big piece of advice that I would give to people. I don't know a ton about personally that, because like I said, I did kind of dig in and self-fund in the beginning of this, and it can be tough. The first year, not only did I not get paid a salary, I also was spending my own money into throwing the conference.
I know about that.
Yeah, exactly.
I pay to work.
Startup life. Yeah, exactly. But it gets better, and as time went on, I was able to stop, writing my own checks to vendors for things that we were needing, and actually started to make a little bit of money and then a little bit more. And I just feel very, lucky that we've had the support of, the community, not only in Portland and Baltimore, but also the global community. Our shows usually pull in about 20 to 25 different countries of attendees that kind of hub into either Baltimore or Portland to check it out.
Yeah, one of the coolest things was at a show, and I can't remember who the gentleman was, but he was trying to figure out why this glass tip was being used so much in the state or whatever. And it was just really kind of cool to know that this person was from a completely different country.
Yeah.
Like kind of all coming together to end the stigma, to make sure that there's like science around it.
Well, that's one of the craziest things for me. Like, I know a couple of times at the shows in the past, like the day that, either if it's Portland, like when me and my team are getting ready to fly out to Portland, and, you're checking the, on our our event software, we have like a heat map that you can kind of pull up, and you can look at all the different countries, how many people from each state, how many people from each country. So it's kind of a cool feeling when you're like getting up and getting ready to go out to your show, but that people are all around the world also like getting up and getting ready to go to the airport and travel sometimes all the way across the world to come to our show. And I mean, we feel super lucky, and we're just so happy that people find the value in coming year after year. And really, it's not necessarily me. It's the speakers that we were able to work with. It's the great sponsors that we're able to work with, and the content that we're able to develop by the great submissions that we get from speakers and people from all over the world.
If someone were interested in doing a submission, what's that process like?
Yeah, so basically, again, we do an abstract submission process for, you can submit for all 4 of the different tracks. And then we also have technical poster presentations in the exhibit hall. That's kind of like, for those that aren't familiar, kind of like a presentation on like a poster board, if you will. Yeah. So you kind of, rather than stand on a stage and kind of speak on a microphone, you kind of have, your posters blown up and put on a pin board, and you kind of stand there, and when people come by and they ask questions, and you talk about the research or cool. Whatever you do. So we have those that range from research to medical to science to patient stories. Mm-hmm. We've had people that like Amy Mellon, who's a local advocate. She usually always does a poster with us, and she kind of details her journey of using cannabis to get where she is off of her medications and her healthcare. So yeah, like when the submission process is open, for instance, now we're accepting abstracts for the Baltimore show in April. Someone would just go to the website. On the program and speakers tab, there's a link that takes you right to our event software, and basically it'll ask you for the basic information: your name, company, your job. You don't have to be affiliated with a company to submit. If you're not with a company, you just put self, whatever the case is. And then it asks you for an abstract that's about 250 words, just basically a brief description of what you're going to be talking about in your presentation, and then like a bio, and that's basically it. And then we have our advisory committee that reviews all of the abstracts that we get. The most that we've gotten so far is almost 400, which is insane.
Ooh, that's a lot of
well, and it's crazy because like most of them are so good, and it's such a hard thing to have to narrow it down, because you just get so many good submissions. But it's great because there have been times where the flow of the show, maybe something didn't fit great for that show, just the flow of the content, but we went back to those speakers and said, hey, this would actually be a better fit for this next show. Would you come and fill that void there? And it's been great. And we've had the opportunity to work with amazing like industry key opinion leaders like Dr. Sue Sisley,
my hero,
yes, Dr. Ethan Russo, Dr. Dustin Sulak, Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, so many great people. We have this great family of doctors out in Portland that we work with, the Knox doctors, and it's mom, dad, and 2 daughters.
Amazing.
Yeah, and they're all
amazing.
medical doctors, and they are in cannabis, and it's really interesting because I would say that the daughters are probably around my age, maybe a little younger, but they're like I said, all medical doctors. But the mom is actually who got the whole family into cannabis. Like she came home one day and was like, hey, let's look at this and do this, and they're really great to work with, and it's just been amazing, really.
Yeah, that is so cool. So let's pause that for a second and let's just talk about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned you've always been a friend of the plant.
Yes.
However, I do know that there was a moment where it changed into more of a medical
Yes.
for you.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that moment.
So I think that, going back to like high school and like the college age, I think that as humans, we're all dealing with things and we're all, suffering through things.
Yeah.
And, I mean, life is hard sometimes and,
Yeah.
nothing is ever perfect. There's
Yeah.
always something to deal with. And I think, for me, just like with a lot of other people, what I thought was maybe, hanging out, having fun, partying a little bit. Really, the cannabis part of that, at least, really ended up being kind of a self-medication.
Yeah.
For me, I've always suffered with, a kind of slight anxiety, slight to moderate anxiety, and cannabis really helps me with that. I was also about 10 years ago in a really bad car accident. Where I sustained shoulder injuries and scapula injuries, which is still something I deal with all the time, and pain, but also PTSD from the car accident. And at the time, I didn't realize, because we hear the term PTSD and we think of veterans immediately,
Yeah,
which they
absolutely.
obviously are suffering so much because of what they're going through out there. But I didn't realize at the time that I started dealing with this myself, that car accidents are actually one of the highest causes of PTSD as well, because you're reliving that and you have fears of getting in cars. And
Yep.
especially for me, at least, I was the passenger in this car
Yeah.
accident. So for me, even now, and you probably can say, like, when we've driven together, I'm very much like, oh. And
I'm
it's
the
just
same way, though,
something-
but yeah,
it's just something that, you'll probably always deal with. But cannabis has definitely helped me control that and keep it to a point to where it's manageable and it doesn't, get in the way of me living my life and operating, my business and those kind of things.
Yeah, and you're just part of it all.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
So when you're thinking about like the future of the cannabis industry, what's keeping you up at night?
So, for me, again, one of the things that I'm so passionate about is children and being on the board at Canna Kids and just some of the stories that I've seen and the families that I've connected with. This is a medicine, but it also is something that is safe enough to use recreationally as an alternative to, most other drugs or alcohol or really even tobacco. But I think that, there's always going to be a need for medical products. I think, I would like to see it be a side-by-side program federally to where we have a medical program as well as a recreational program. Some of my concerns with going completely rec and throwing medical out the window federally, which is a conversation that, lobbyists have been having on the Hill, is for me, the patients that we work with, if they're pediatric patients that are as old as, months old, and this is regulated like alcohol, and you have to be 21 years old to purchase, how would these people have access? And of course, there could be exemptions and special, rules for special people, but it just seems a little silly that we can't have a side-by-side program. I know Colorado has done a pretty good job at maintaining their medical as well as a recreational program. I will say that most of the other places that have started with medical and then rolled out recreational, it basically diminishes the medical program and then sometimes
that's a big fear of mine too.
Yeah.
When you've noticed in that states, like what is diminished, like what is kind of who gets affected by that?
Well, really, the patients
Yeah.
get affected by it because when it comes to recreational, there's more money to be made in taxes.
True that.
And things like that. And for me, I also feel that this is a federally Schedule I drug right now, but if it was not, this would be something that would be covered under insurance. This would be something, there's a lot of patient medical rights that would come along with this that we don't have right now. For instance, I know that Epidiolex, that was rescheduled to, I believe, Schedule 5, that can be covered under insurance. So it's kind of the same idea with that.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that would be great. So on the flip side of that, what are you most excited about?
So I'm most excited about seeing this plant continuing to, evolve and really help more people and on a larger scale. And I think, since I've been in the industry alone, just since, about 2014, we've seen so many states come on board with this. We've seen so many, countries like Canada, who's completely legalized this for recreational and medical use. Australia, that has legalized an entire country for medical. We've seen Colombia legalize completely medical. So I'm really excited to see this plant more destigmatized and more normalized and legalized eventually. And I think we're not that far off. And, something that I really am also passionate about is the social justice issue. Obviously, it's no secret that the war on drugs and prohibition unappropriately affected communities of color and people that, are still suffering from this. There are. I say it's a problem when we have, rich, straight white men in the U.S. and all over the world that are, millionaires and just, profiting and making great livings off this industry and this plant, when you have, black and brown people are still sitting behind bars for, nonviolent cannabis charges. So there's a lot of work being done for that. I know my great friend Bo Money, she has the National Diversity Cannabis Association. There's a Minority Cannabis Business Association. There's so many great groups that are really advocating for this. And, for me as an LGBTQ individual, I feel, although our journey and our struggle and our fight is different, we can relate and really work together to try to, lift each other up. And that's something I'm really excited to see. And I think we're seeing more and more of it. I know that we just saw like National Expungement Week, I think was just a week
amazing.
ago. Yeah. And, and my thing is like, if these people are sitting behind bars for nonviolent cannabis charges, they should have just as right as a seat at this table as anybody else.
Because isn't it, you can't have a criminal record and work in the cannabis industry, can you?
Right.
So that makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah.
Like literally none, how that is even possible. I think the light was really shined on me, and while I understood all of that, it was during the athletes panel in Portland, when it was very obvious that predominantly white sports had no issues with any of their players using cannabis. And that, like, I can't even remember, I posted about it, but the numbers of NFL and NBA use words like lifetime ban, all of this. The MLB, if you're a senior player, it's a slap on the wrist. And the NHL, nothing.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, that's interesting, because that is literally, if you look at it, white sports against black sports. Yeah. And it's so different. And it just enraged me and infuriated me, and I was like, this has got to stop.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because we had like a very wide variety of those leagues represented at the Portland show. I know we had Marvin Washington from the NFL, Cliff Robinson from the NBA, Riley Cote from the NHL, and Anna Simmons, who's a professional female rugby player. So I think that's definitely really important to point out. And these players are, they're getting banged up and roughed up for our entertainment, really on the weekly. And, when they get injured, they're, going to see doctors, and they're just getting, shoved pharmaceuticals and put back on the field until they can't anymore.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
That they gave him, what shot was it? A Toradol shot?
Yeah.
That at the NFL, like, correct me if I'm getting the story wrong, but before the game, you would line up and get a pain reliever shot, so you could go out there and hit harder.
Yeah, I would not be surprised at all by that. And the thing is, like, it's these guys are forced to retire at such young ages because they're just getting so roughed up. And then they're almost forgotten of. It's like they're heroes, and then and these CTE issues and these other brain issues and these other things. It's like, let's at least let these people have an option to use something that's less harmful than opiates. So there's so many issues, you know what I mean? Like when it comes to, sports, and, I think it's really interesting. We also have a really cute couple that like comes and speaks with us. It's Anthony and Heather DeRose. I don't know if you've met them, but they're big into cannabis and fitness.
Oh yeah.
So they they consume cannabis, and they do like half marathons and things like that. And
these are my people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're I know, because that's very much your neck of the woods too. But we actually sponsored. They're doing I believe a half marathon. It might be it's either a marathon or a half marathon. But the Cannabis Science Conference is a gold sponsor of both of them. And
oh wow,
it's really cool seeing them. And like I said, they're just really cool, young, super healthy, super fit couple. And I think that's really important. People like them and people like you that really are defying the odds and saying like, hey, not everybody is, consuming cannabis and eating a box of donuts and sitting on the couch watching TV. Some people are actually, using this as, an encouraging workout tool.
Oh, yeah. And ways to feel better, both mentally and physically.
Sure.
I mean, we all know that. And if you're a friend of the plant, you understand that more than anything. And I think that's what makes it so hard to explain to people is like, how can one thing help me with a migraine and PMS cramps and stop making me be a bitch and help me with my torn rotator cuff? Like, it's very confusing for people to understand that. Like, because we take so many different pills for every little thing that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that after, my car accident, I had a whole list of different medications that I was on. And, it's really interesting that doctors are quick to prescribe these medications, but they're not as quick to really go through the talk with you. Like, hey, you might actually get seriously super addicted to this and it could ruin your life. And I think we need to have more of those conversations, and people need to know what they're taking. And, especially, the geriatric, the elderly community, when you look at the numbers of how many, prescriptions on average that, this community is taking, it's seriously alarming. And I think our society has really gotten into the one size fits all pill idea, and that is kind of going back to the original prohibition back in the 30s when it was in New York, the Rockefeller, Anslinger, Hearst, DuPont, and Mellon, these guys and these families that wanted to push pharmaceuticals and papers and all these other industries, that cannabis was being used for many different things, and hemp as well. And I believe that when you look at the numbers of how much of the world's opiate supply the U.S. consumes, it's alarming. It's 2 to 3 times more than anywhere else in the world. And I always say we're not hurting more here. We're not suffering from super different conditions or diseases for the most part. So why do we need so many opiates in this country? And we're here in Baltimore. All you have to do is ride down the road not too far, and you'll see the implications of this opiate epidemic. And what most people don't think of is sometimes 9 out of 10 times these people that are on the street addicted to heroin have started from some kind of prescription that they stem from. And it's all about someone, you might get a surgery and get a little medication and get through it and be fine. But depending on your personality type, if you have an addictive personality, it might not go the same way for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happened to my mother.
Yeah.
She had something called trigeminal neuralgia, and they gave her opioids, and 20 years later, she's dead because of an opioid addiction, right? Like, when she passed away, 5+ boxes of fentanyl patches and 4 bottles of morphine, and how she could have had all of that just goes to show, prescriptions were being written just to be written. And I think for me, that is what I'm most excited about, is that this vicious cycle stops. Yeah. And if you want to, you have a completely different way you can choose to live your life.
Absolutely.
And we just have to work really hard to make sure that everybody has access to that, which is why I appreciate what you do so much. And the word you use, connector, is the perfect word to describe what you do. You are literally bridging gaps and connecting from all areas of cannabis, not just from science individuals, but even down to community level. And I've seen what that does for community members, even to come to the Cannabis Science Conference, to become more informed. They become better advocates, and then the movement continues to move forward. So I appreciate what you do at the bottom from my heart, and your friendship, and really for giving me the opportunity to be at the Cannabis Science Conference. Still introducing Dr. Sue Sicily will be forever a highlight in my life. So I appreciate that.
No, and and that means so much to me, and it's been so fabulous, being friends with you and following your journey. And like I said to you earlier today on the phone, I was so glad that you got to hang out with Sue in the car and get to really see her personality, because she just shines, and her little Dodger, her doggy that follows her everywhere. He's adorable. And it's been an honor having you at the shows, and just having you in my life too.
Thanks. We'll have you back on for the Cannabis Science Conference,
absolutely,
just so
yeah.
we'll make announcements. But can people get tickets now
Yes,
for Baltimore?
So tickets for the Baltimore show are on sale at CannabisScienceConference.com. We also have information about sponsorship and exhibiting if any companies are interested in that. And then if any of your listeners are interested, you can use promo code MJ25 at checkout, and that's
Sweet.
good for 25% off tickets.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So hope to see everyone in April. Thanks again, Josh, for coming. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
You can find me on social media, just Joshua Crossney, on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter. It is jcannajosh. And then you can also email me at josh@cannabisscienceconference.com.
Awesome. Thanks again, Josh. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next time.